It's the Penn State Wrestling Show here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, and of course at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, and a wrestling reporter Greg Pickle with us today to talk about all the latest action going on with the Nittany Lions. Of course, we do this show once a week, so there's a lot to review after two big dual meets for the Nittany Lions, both Iowa and Rutgers at the BJC on Monday. So let's actually start there, Greg. Let's start with Rutgers, and then we'll work our way back. A little bit of controversy maybe at the BJC duel. Can you fill us in on what happened and your thoughts about the replay system with the Nittany Lions?
Yeah, so if you're not aware of what we're talking about, Penn State, of course, won its 1,000th dual meet as a program by beating Rutgers 35-3 on Monday night at the Bryce Jordan Center. Pretty nice crowd on hand on a night where obviously it's tough to get people out into in-state college for a Monday night match, especially after the Super Bowl, and weather was an issue. So a pretty good crowd. But the dual meet started at 125 pounds. Braden Davis is the second-ranked wrestler in the country at 125 pounds. Beat Dean Peterson 4-1 in sudden victory. That match went to sudden victory, and Penn State comes into a situation where it was favored in most matches, but was, had a few toss-ups, and that was one of them. So when Braden Davis was leading late in the match, and it looked like towards the end, right around the buzzer, Peterson had taken him down, or at the very least may have gotten some points in another manner. I'm not 100% sure what Rutgers was arguing. I've seen some fans talking about it could have been this, it could have been that. And regardless of what it was, Rutgers wanted to challenge that situation for a potential scoring opportunity to win the match. The Bryce Jordan Center, for whatever reason, technical or otherwise, did not have video replay available at that point in time, according to the head official. Cael Sanderson then did confirm that afterwards. But so to me, it's just something, and we have no new info there why that was the case. If the replay system went back online later in the match, but ultimately it's just a situation where technical difficulties do happen, but it's just one of those deals, T. Frank, where I think you and Penn State fans would agree, you just have to have it right. You can't find yourself in that situation, and if it's not working, there has to be an alternative of some sort. And I know that it's easy to sit here and armchair quarterback these things and say, well, they should have done this, they should have done that. But if you have replay available, it needs to be available. And that's part of the rules. And so this match was on Big Ten Network. There had to be some kind of a workaround they could have used to get that situation right. Penn State fans remember the football team fell victim. And I'm not saying the Rutgers wrestler and Rutgers fell victim to this, because I really don't think there would have been any scoring awarded anyway, but they should have had the opportunity to use their challenge brick and find out and get the referees to take a second look at it. Penn State fans remember when there was an interception against Ohio State, not all the angles were available to the crew. They didn't give Penn State what should have certainly been a Penn State interception. So, and Penn State fans to this day are frustrated about that. And Rutgers fans, I'm sure, will be annoyed by this for some time as well. But ultimately, a good win for Penn State. Like I said, number 1,000 in program history, an impressive accomplishment. The Penn State wrestling team has won, in 75% of its all-time matches and change. So Cael Sanderson, of course, are huge. Yeah, so it's hard to believe, but it's true. Cael Sanderson staff, obviously a huge part of the lineage and the victories that Penn State had here. But it's important to remember there were a lot of people that came before Cael Sanderson and his staff that put the foundation in place for this program. You think back to Rich Lorenzo, to Jeff Fritz, to Troy Sunderland. So a lot of people should feel very good right now, not just because the Penn State wrestling dynasty continues to roll on, but because they put the work in early to help Cael Sanderson and his staff want to come to Penn State, which has, of course, led to all the success since.
So let's circle back to win 999 then and talk about Iowa. Top 5 duel. Penn State wins emphatically in that one. Were you surprised by the final results? Because I know we talked about there was a couple of toss-ups. You wouldn't have been surprised if Penn State won, which anyone wouldn't be at this point. But I guess what was your takeaway from the way that they won that dual meet?
Yeah, a couple of things. That was, of course, Cael Sanderson's 200th dual meet win as the head coach at Penn State. So as we continue to play the numbers game, Penn State looks to continue its consecutive dual meet streak this weekend. We'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, a couple of things stood out to me about this. Number one, the way Bo Bartlett took it to Real Woods. Bartlett moved up to number 1 at 141 prior to that match, and then cemented himself in that spot by beating Woods, the previous number 1, at 141 pounds, 7-2. And it was, I hesitate to say it wasn't as close as the final score indicates, but Bartlett really took it to him and really put a solid and strong match together, and showed that if anyone doubted, his abilities to potentially win this weight class, which you shouldn't have, but if you did, you have absolutely no reason to now. So that was one of the big takeaways. Mitchell Messenbrink continues to roll at 165 pounds for Penn State. Entering that match, he was ranked number 7. Michael Caliendo of Iowa was number 6. Messenbrink beat him 12-6. And again, a match that the final score may not have been as indicative of how well the Nittany Lion wrestled. He gave up a late takedown that did not allow him to win by major decision. And then I think the other thing, of course, is that, just like we'll get into here, looking ahead to Nebraska, Penn State did, of course, lose at 125, did, of course, lose at 149, but then the upper weights rolled from there. And that's how Penn State has long created big divides in dual meets and huge final score margins in dual meets, is getting those upper weights going, regardless of what the lightweight and middleweight guys do. So that was the case here again. And yeah, it was every bit, like I think we talked about before, you could have envisioned a way for this match to be close, and you could have envisioned a way for Penn State to run away with it. And it was certainly, if you were thinking they were going to do the latter, you nailed it, because it was exactly what happened on the road at Carver Hawkeye Arena.
So let's talk about Nebraska then. Let's get into what's coming up. So run down what you think is going to happen, and highlight what you want to highlight here for the upcoming dual meet.
Yeah, so Penn State back in Rec Hall can clinch the Big Ten regular season dual meet title on Sunday at Rec Hall when it wrestles Nebraska at 4 on the Big Ten Network. This is a sneaky good match, T. Frank. I was listening to the audio from Cael Sanderson's news conference yesterday. Of course, we were over at the football availability on Tuesday, but the question was phrased as this could be your toughest match of the year. And I'm not 100% sure coming into this season you would have said that. You would have, I think most would have probably had pointed to Ohio State and Iowa, knowing that Nebraska had some very talented wrestlers. But I think if you were forced to make a pick back in October or November, you probably would have had this at maybe second on your list or third. I'm not sure you would have had it first, but it has the makings of it. You look across the potential lineup sheet here. Number 12, Caleb Smith at 125 from Nebraska. We'll try and give Braden Davis everything he has. Jacob Van D is number 17 at 133. He'll have, of course, face Aaron Nagao, who, continues to some days wrestle very well and some days struggle to finish his offense, which can lead to any number of outcomes. Brock Hardy at number 7 at 141, maybe not as much of a toss-up as you maybe would have expected or thought after what we saw Bartlett do to Real Woods last Friday night in Iowa City. So then at 149, Nebraska will certainly be looking for bonus points from number 1 Ridge Lovett when he faces Shane Van Ness's his replacement, Tyler Casack at 149. By the way, I should note that some fans were concerned about Casack. He was mat returned against Rutgers, and it looked like he may have hit his head. I guess doesn't look like he did. The match wasn't stopped to check that out. He was checked out afterwards, according to Cael Sanderson, and he did not say that he was good to wrestle on Sunday, but he did not. There was no. It was not like he implied that he wouldn't be available. He made it sound like everything was good to go after he got checked out. So that's a spot though where Casack can stake his claim to move up the rankings, and of course, Ridge Lovett is going to want to say, "Hey, look here, freshman, I'm number 1." And this is what number 1 looks like. So that'll be a fun match to watch. And then at 157, you have another good one potentially. Not 157. I'm sorry. 157. Peyton Robb, who's been around for quite some time with the Cornhuskers. He's going to take on Levi Haynes. And then you'll have another ranked match at 165 with Antrell Taylor versus Mitchell Messenbrink. So again, I think you said it a moment ago, T. Frank, but you're not in a place anymore where you sit here and say, I think Penn State's going to win. I mean, you can feel pretty good beyond the level of think that they're going to win, but there's a chance for this to be closer than expected. There's a chance for some of these Nebraska wrestlers to, even if they don't win, keep these matches to just a decision, which of course could keep the team score closer than many might think. So very interested to watch some of these bouts this weekend, but like I just got done saying, the key for Penn State has always been, and maybe always will be, even if they don't always go well at 125 or 133 or what have you, they roll through those upper weights. And this match looks to be one where, as long as everyone's healthy, Penn State will be able to do that. Keep in mind the Lions were without a couple of wrestlers due to illness against Rutgers. So we'll see how that shakes out. It seems to be something that what's the right way to put this? Penn State seems to be, impacted by this illness bug fairly frequently this year. Certainly, and they're not going out and trying to be, but it's been a fact of the matter. So I think
lingering, right? Since about Christmas, so I think, it seems like, or the new year.
Yep. Right after Christmas break. And Cael Sanderson, I think it was last week, talked about that. Just the fact that, they had a long break between their matches. They wrestled Lehigh, and then, of course, they had the NWCA All-Star Classic. You had guys travel to senior nationals. You had guys at home for a long time. Then everyone gets back together. And, as we all know, with how teams work, you practice together, you eat together, everything else. So it does not take much for, some kind of illness to start going around. And Penn State's been impacted by that. So I do think it's fair at this point to, if you're trying to project this match, put in with a grain of salt or an asterisk, whatever you want, that these look like the potential matchups. These look like the probable wins, etc. But I think at this point, it's just fair to say you cannot be 100% sure that all 10 Penn State starters will weigh in and wrestle. They want to, of course, but the goal is getting ready for nationals. And so if there's a chance that doing so, wrestling now would impact that, they're going to lean towards going the other direction. So we'll see. But certainly a win on paper for Penn State, but could be some fun matches on Big Ten Network as, again, the Lions try to clinch the Big Ten regular season title.
So let me just I'm not going to pin you down for a score prediction, but just looking at Michigan, 27-9, Ohio State, 28-9, Iowa, 29-6. Is Nebraska in that territory of holding the Nittany Lions under 30 points, or are they going to be not able to do that? I guess in their biggest matches this year, Penn State is still dominated. So are you thinking more along those lines, or is it going to be a wider gulf and Penn State just doesn't run away with it, which is what we've seen them do in certain other meets this year?
I think the Ohio State final score is indicative of where this could go. I think that's probably a fair one to point back to. Also at Rec Hall, of course, Penn State looking good in that match, winning 28-9 over the Buckeyes. I could see this match, T. Frank, ending up in a similar place in terms of the final score. I do see some, and Ohio State, the reason that was not as crazy, I guess, as you could say, as it could have been, is because Ohio State came to wrestle. And they kept some matches from being major decisions or from being technical falls or pins. And I think Nebraska is capable of doing the same. So I do think that you are going to see some possible, what look like they could be major decisions turn into decisions. That's okay. Penn State will take that if they're working on things or trying to get, again, obviously ready for the postseason in March, which is going to be here before we know it. So, I look back to that Ohio State match, 28-9, and to answer your question, I think something in that ballpark would sound about right.
Nebraska on Sunday, and then next Sunday, the 25th, the final dual meet of the regular season against Edinboro. So, as you mentioned, the Big Tens are just around the corner, which means NCAAs are just around the corner, which means March is just around the corner. Wow. 2024 going really fast. So that'll do it today for the Penn State Wrestling Show. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Greg Pickle doing a great job as well. As always, Greg, where do Penn State wrestling fans find you to talk about these things and to get in on the wrestling community?
Yeah, we'll be over at bluewhiteillustrated.com for plenty of notes and quotes and previews of this Nebraska match throughout the week. We'll have match day coverage on Sunday. And then, as you mentioned, I don't know where this wrestling season has went, but then obviously we'll have senior day coverage as Penn State takes on Edinboro as well. Interested to see, there's some guys that could be celebrated at that event and then come back. And there's some guys that could not be celebrated and not come back. So it'll have a bit of a football vibe to it where you're trying to draw some conclusions from it that may not be there to draw. But first, Penn State has to get through Nebraska, and we'll have complete coverage of that over at bluewhiteillustrated.com.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you next week on the Penn State